In a moment that seemed almost ordinary, just a quiet confirmation during a private conversation, the British monarchy was suddenly thrown into one of its most shocking internal revelations in decades. Duchess Sophie calmly confirmed something no one expected. The late Queen had appointed her and Princess Anne as co-executors of her most sensitive personal directives. But one detail made the revelation explosive. Camilla had been completely excluded. And as the palace scrambled to contain the implications, insiders began whispering that this decision was far more deliberate than anyone imagined. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as a quiet confirmation quickly echoed through the palace corridors with the force of a thunderclap. For those who had spent years observing the delicate balance of power within the royal household, Sophie's words were more than surprising, they were deeply unsettling. The role of executor within royal affairs is rarely discussed publicly. Yet within the private world of monarchy, it carries extraordinary weight. Executors are not simply responsible for distributing possessions or reading formal instructions. They become guardians of personal wishes, protectors of sensitive documents, and stewards of decisions that can shape the family's future long after a monarch's reign has ended. The realization of this power made Sophie's confirmation even more startling, because if the Queen had entrusted such responsibility to Sophie and Princess Anne, it meant she had made a decision rooted in profound trust forged over years of quiet observation, loyalty, and unwavering duty. Those who worked within the royal institution understood immediately that this was not a ceremonial appointment. It was a strategic one. The Queen had chosen individuals she believed could carry the weight of her final wishes without hesitation, without political calculation, and without the distraction of public drama. Inside the palace, reactions unfolded in hushed conversations and guarded glances. Senior aides reportedly began asking the same question, again and again. Why had Camilla not been included? In the public imagination, Camilla's position within the monarchy had grown increasingly prominent, especially following her role alongside the king. Many had quietly assumed that she would hold some form of authority in overseeing the Queen's final directives. Yet Sophie's confirmation revealed something entirely different. The Queen had made a deliberate choice to bypass that expectation, and that decision immediately elevated the significance of Sophie and Anne's roles. Princess Anne had long been known as the monarchy's most tireless worker, someone whose dedication to royal duty rarely wavered, regardless of personal cost. Her reputation for discipline and loyalty was legendary within royal circles. Sophie, meanwhile, had built her own reputation through quiet consistency. Over time, she had become one of the Queen's most trusted companions, someone who approached royal life with humility rather than ambition. Together, these two women represented something the Queen had always valued deeply: reliability. They were figures who did not seek attention, who understood the gravity of tradition, and who carried their responsibilities without unnecessary spectacle. For years, palace insiders had noticed the Queen's increasing reliance on them for sensitive matters. Conversations that once involved larger groups had gradually narrowed, often including Anne or Sophie when difficult family decisions were discussed. Looking back, many now believe those moments were not accidental. They may have been part of a quiet preparation, a way for the Queen to observe how each woman handled pressure, discretion, and loyalty. If so, the appointment of Sophie and Anne as co-executors was not an impulsive decision made near the end of the Queen's life. It was the culmination of years of careful consideration. But the deeper palace insiders examined the situation, the more they realized something unsettling. The Queen's decision was not simply about assigning responsibility. It was also about defining trust in a way that carried powerful implications for the future of the royal family. Because in choosing Sophie and Anne, the Queen had effectively drawn a line around the individuals she believed would protect her legacy without compromise. And as that realization began to settle over the royal household, one truth became impossible to ignore. This confirmation was only the beginning. Beneath the surface of this revelation lay deeper questions about loyalty, influence, and the unseen dynamics that had shaped the Queen's most private decisions. But the real mystery was not simply who had been chosen, it was why the Queen trusted Sophie and Anne above everyone else. a decision rooted in years of quiet loyalty and unseen responsibility. To understand why the Queen made such a striking decision, one must step inside the private world she guarded more fiercely than any crown jewel. In that world, trust was everything, and it was earned slowly over decades. While many members of the royal family held titles and public roles, only a select few were ever allowed into the Queen's inner circle. And among them, two names quietly rose above the rest: Princess Anne and Duchess Sophie. For the Queen, trust was never built on public applause or headlines. It was built on quiet reliability, on the steady rhythm of duty carried out day after day, year after year, without complaint and without expectation of praise. Throughout her long reign, she observed people carefully, often saying little while learning everything about those around her. Those who sought attention rarely earned her deepest confidence. Instead, it was those who remained constant in moments of pressure, those who carried responsibility without drama, who gradually found themselves closer to the monarch's private council. Princess Anne had long embodied that principle. Within royal circles, she was often described as the family's most disciplined working royal, a woman who approached royal duty with unwavering determination. While others navigated the glare of public fascination, Anne focused on the quiet mechanics of service. She rarely chased recognition, rarely allowed personal emotion to interfere with responsibility. Over the decades, this consistency forged an unshakable reputation. The Queen knew that Anne understood the monarchy not as a privilege, but as a lifelong obligation. That understanding created a bond that ran deeper than titles or ceremony. Yet the rise of Duchess Sophie within this inner circle was, in many ways, even more remarkable. When she first entered the royal family, few imagined she would one day become one of the Queen's most trusted confidants. She arrived without the weight of royal heritage or the powerful legacy attached to older members of the family. Instead, Sophie built her position quietly. She listened more than she spoke. She learned the rhythms of royal life patiently, adjusting to its pressures without seeking shortcuts or attention. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Queen began to rely on her presence. Over time, their relationship evolved beyond formal duty. Conversations between them became more personal, more reflective. Sophie's calm demeanor and thoughtful perspective offered something the Queen valued deeply: a sense of stability in a family fait on, surrounded by tension and scrutiny. Royal aides would later recall how frequently Sophie was invited to spend time with the Queen during quieter moments when official roles faded and genuine trust could grow. Those interactions were not publicized, yet they were quietly shaping the dynamics of the monarchy itself. Princess Anne and Sophie, though different in personality, shared a rare understanding of the institution they served. Both women recognized that the monarchy depended not on spectacle, but on endurance. They understood that the crown was sustained by discipline, by discretion, and by a willingness to place duty above personal ambition. The Queen noticed this alignment early, and as years passed, she began to rely on them not just for ceremonial appearances, but for conversations about matters that carried deeper weight. For palace insiders, the pattern eventually became impossible to ignore. Whenever difficult decisions arose, whenever delicate family matters required careful handling, Anne and Sophie often seemed to be nearby. Sometimes they were present during private consultations. Other times they were entrusted with responsibilities that required quiet judgment. What seemed like routine cooperation was, in retrospect, something much more significant. It was preparation. Those who observed the Queen closely understood that she rarely revealed her long-term intentions openly. Instead, she allowed them to unfold gradually through subtle choices and carefully placed trust. And in the years leading toward the later stages of her reign, the presence of Anne and Sophie at her side became more frequent, more deliberate. It was as though she was quietly ensuring that two individuals she trusted completely understood the weight of decisions that might one day fall into their hands. That realization would later send ripples through the palace. Because, if the Queen had indeed been guiding Anne and Sophie toward greater responsibility all along, then her decision to appoint them as co-executors was not a sudden act at all. It was the final step in a process that had been unfolding silently for years, a process rooted in loyalty, discretion, and an unspoken understanding of the monarchy's fragile balance. Yet the deeper the story went, the clearer it became that the Queen's decision was not merely about trust, it was also about control over the monarchy's most sensitive future decisions. Most people imagine an executor as a simple administrator, someone who handles paperwork and ensures a will is carried out. But within the British monarchy, the role carries far more weight. Executors oversee private instructions, family arrangements, and decisions that shape how royal legacies are preserved. When the Queen selected Anne and Sophie, she wasn't just choosing caretakers of her estate, she was entrusting them with control over some of the monarchy's most guarded secrets. To the outside world, the word executor may sound procedural, almost ordinary. But inside the quiet machinery of a royal institution built on centuries of tradition, the role carries a gravity that few truly understand. Executors become the custodians of the monarch's final intentions. They handle documents that may never be seen by the public. They interpret instructions that could affect relationships within the royal household for years to come, and perhaps most importantly, they stand at the intersection between private family wishes and the public institution that the monarchy represents. This is why the Queen's choice carried such profound significance. By appointing Princess Anne and Duchess Sophie as co-executors, she effectively placed them in a position of rare authority, one that extended far beyond the distribution of personal possessions. The role meant overseeing private letters, confidential directives, confection directives, and sensitive bequests that might hold emotional or political consequences. Every sealed document, every handwritten instruction, every carefully considered note left behind by the Queen would now pass through their hands before reaching its intended destination. Within the palace, those who understood this responsibility immediately grasped the magnitude of the decision. Executors within royal tradition often serve as interpreters of a monarch's intentions. If the Queen had left guidance for family members, reflections about the monarchy's future, or personal messages meant to shape how certain matters should be handled, Anne and Sophie would be the ones responsible for ensuring those wishes were honoured precisely as intended. Their judgment would carry enormous weight, not because they sought power, but because the Queen had trusted them to exercise it with restraint and loyalty. This trust did not emerge suddenly. It was the product of decades of observation. The Queen had spent her reign studying the character of those around her, quietly measuring how they handled pressure, responsibility, and discretion. She understood that influence within the monarchy could easily become tangled with ambition, and so when selecting the individuals who would safeguard her final directives, she chose not those with the most visible authority, but those whose integrity had proven unwavering. Princess Anne represented a lifetime of discipline. She had weathered crises, endured relentless schedules, and carried the expectations of royal duty with quiet resilience. Sophie, meanwhile, had demonstrated something equally valuable: the ability to listen, to support, and to remain composed during moments of family tension. Together, they embodied the kind of steady leadership the Queen believed the monarchy needed during uncertain times. Palace aides soon began whispering another possibility. What if the Queen's instructions extended beyond personal matters? What if they included reflections about the monarchy's direction, guidance meant to help the family navigate the delicate balance between tradition and change? Executors are not policymakers, yet their role often places them at the center of conversations where sensitive decisions unfold. If the Queen had left thoughts about the institution she served for so long, Anne and Sophie would be the ones entrusted with preserving them, and this realization began to shift the atmosphere within the royal household. The Queen's decision was no longer viewed simply as a personal preference. It was seen as a strategic act, one designed to ensure that the most delicate aspects of her legacy would be handled by individuals she trusted absolutely. That level of responsibility carried quiet influence, the kind that rarely appears in headlines, but can shape the course of family dynamics behind closed doors. Yet with every new understanding, closed doors, may a deeper and more uncomfortable question. Because as palace insiders began to grasp the immense authority now resting with Anne and Sophie, another detail grew impossible to ignore. The Queen had not only chosen them with care, she had also chosen not to include someone many believed would naturally hold such a role. And it was precisely this realization that made one glaring absence impossible to ignore: because someone many expected to hold this role had been left completely outside it. When the details of the Queen's decision began circulating privately, one question echoed through palace corridors. Why was Camilla excluded? As the wife of the king and one of the monarchy's most visible figures, many assumed she would naturally hold a role in overseeing the Queen's final directives. But the Queen had chosen otherwise, and that decision, quiet, deliberate, and unmistakable, sent a ripple of speculation through the royal household. At first, the absence was noticed only in quiet conversations among those closest to the institution. Senior aides reading through confidential notes reportedly paused when they realized that Camilla's name did not appear where many expected it to. In a royal system where roles often follow a predictable pattern of hierarchy and family proximity, the omission felt striking. Not explosive in a public sense, there were no announcements, no dramatic declarations, but powerful in the quiet way only royal decisions can be. Inside the palace, silence often speaks louder than proclamations. For years, observers had watched Camilla's position within the monarchy steadily strengthen. As the king's partner and a prominent public figure, she had become an increasingly familiar presence during official duties. Many insiders assumed that such visibility would naturally extend into private responsibilities as well. The idea that she might play a role in overseeing the Queen's final directives seemed logical to those who viewed the monarchy through the lens of modern hierarchy. Yet the Queen's choice suggested something far more personal, something guided not by expectation, but by her own judgment. That judgment had always defined the Queen's leadership style. Throughout her reign, she demonstrated a quiet independence when making decisions about the royal family's internal structure. Protocol mattered, but it was never the only factor she considered. Personal loyalty, discretion, and the ability to protect the institution during moments of difficulty often carried greater weight in her calculations. Those who understood the Queen well knew that she rarely allowed external pressure or assumptions to dictate her choices. When she acted, it was because she believed the decision would safeguard the monarchy she had spent her life serving. Within days of Sophie's confirmation, speculation began spreading quietly among royal observers. Some wondered whether the Queen had simply preferred individuals she had known and relied upon for decades. Others believed the choice reflected her deep confidence in Anne's steadfast discipline and Sophie's calm reliability. But there were also whispers that the decision revealed something more subtle, an intention to keep certain responsibilities within a circle she believed would prioritize stability above all else. These whispers carried emotional weight because the royal family is not merely an institution. It is also a complex network of relationships shaped by loyalty, history, and sometimes quiet tension. Every appointment, every omission, every gesture of trust can carry meaning far beyond its formal purpose. In this case, the Queen's choice created an unspoken contrast. Anne and Sophie were entrusted with safeguarding her most personal directives, while Camilla, despite her visible role, within the monarchy remained outside that responsibility. For some within the palace, this contrast sparked uneasy questions. Had the Queen been sending a signal about who she believed should guide the handling of her private legacy? Or had she simply followed the instincts she had always trusted, instincts shaped by years of observing how different members of the family navigated the pressures of royal life? No official explanation accompanied the decision, and that silence only intensified curiosity. Outside the palace walls, royal watchers began noticing the same pattern emerging through scattered hints and careful confirmations. The more the story unfolded, the clearer it became that this was not a minor administrative choice. It was a decision with emotional and symbolic weight, one that suggested the Queen had been thinking carefully about who would carry out her final wishes long before the public ever learned of it. Yet as the speculation continued, another realization slowly began to take shape among those closest to the monarchy. The Queen's decision did not feel spontaneous. It did not feel like a last-minute arrangement made during the closing chapter of her reign. Instead, it carried the unmistakable mark of preparation, the kind of preparation that comes from years of observation, reflection, and quiet planning behind palace walls. But the deeper palace insiders examined the Queen's choice, the more they realized it wasn't sudden. It was the culmination of years of quiet observation and careful planning. Those who knew the Queen best often described her leadership style in one word: patient. She rarely acted impulsively. Decisions that seemed sudden to the outside world were often the result of years of silent reflection, and according to insiders, the appointment of Anne and Sophie as co-executors may have been part of a plan the Queen had been quietly shaping for a very long time. For decades, the Queen governed not only a nation, but a family whose every action was examined under a relentless spotlight. In such an environment, decisions could never be rushed. Every choice carried consequences that could echo for generations. Those who worked closest to her often noticed that she preferred to observe quietly rather than intervene immediately. She watched how individuals responded to pressure, how they handled responsibility, and most importantly, how they behaved when no one seemed to be paying attention. From those observations, she formed judgments that were rarely explained, but almost always precise. This careful approach shaped how the Queen prepared the monarchy for inevitable transitions. Long before any public announcement, she often began placing people into positions where their character could be tested. Small responsibilities would gradually become larger ones. Invitations to private consultations would slowly increase. Trust was not granted all at once. It was earned piece by piece over time. By the time an official decision finally emerged, the groundwork had already been laid through years of subtle preparation. Many palace insiders now believe that this same method guided her decision regarding Anne and Sophie. In the later years of her reign, both women appeared to take on responsibilities that required extraordinary discretion. They were present during conversations that never appeared in official schedules. They were asked to assist with delicate family matters that demanded calm judgment, and while the public often saw these moments as routine cooperation within the royal household, those who observed closely sensed something deeper unfolding behind the scenes. Princess Anne had always been a pillar of reliability within the monarchy. Her dedication to royal duty never seemed to waver, even when personal challenges or public scrutiny intensified. The Queen understood that Anne possessed a rare ability to separate emotion from responsibility when necessary. That discipline made her invaluable during moments when the monarchy required steady leadership rather than dramatic reaction. Over time, Anne's presence became almost synonymous with stability within the royal structure. Duchess Sophie's path into the Queen's inner circle developed differently, but was no less significant. Her strength lay in her ability to listen, to support, and to maintain composure during sensitive conversations. While others navigated royal life through public attention or political positioning, Sophie built her influence quietly through trust. The Queen appeared to recognize that quality early. As the years passed, Sophie was increasingly seen accompanying the monarch during moments that required careful discussion rather than ceremonial display. Palace staff began noticing subtle patterns. When a matter required absolute discretion, Anne or Sophie often seemed to be involved. When conversations touched upon family harmony or the future of royal responsibilities, their presence was quietly welcomed. None of this attracted public attention at the time. Yet within palace walls, it gradually formed a picture that only became clear later. The Queen was observing, preparing, and deciding long before the world realized it. Behind this preparation lay a deeper motivation. The Queen understood that the monarchy's strength depended on continuity and trust. She had witnessed periods of tension within the royal family and knew how quickly uncertainty could ripple through the institution. By placing sensitive responsibilities in the hands of individuals she believed would prioritize duty above personal ambition, she was protecting something far larger than individual relationships. She was protecting the stability of the crown itself. This decision also revealed her profound understanding of family dynamics. The Queen knew the personalities within her household better than anyone. She understood which voices could bring calm during difficult moments and which situations might require careful mediation rather than confrontation. Choosing Anne and Sophie was not simply about loyalty. It was about balance. They represented a combination of discipline and quiet empathy that could navigate the emotional complexities of the royal family while preserving the dignity of the institution. When viewed through this lens, the appointment no longer appears sudden. It appears strategic. It reflects a monarch who had spent years ensuring that the most delicate aspects of her legacy would be guided by individuals she believed could carry out her wishes without distraction or division. The Queen had played a long game, one shaped by patience, observation, and an unwavering sense of duty. Yet even as the Queen's strategy began to make sense, one new question emerged: what exactly were Anne and Sophie now responsible for carrying out? Executors don't simply carry out instructions, they protect them. And when those instructions belong to a monarch who ruled for decades, the contents can shake the future of an entire institution. As Anne and Sophie stepped into their extraordinary responsibility, speculation began to swirl about what the Queen might have left behind. Letters, private guidance, perhaps even directives meant to guide the monarchy long after her reign had ended. Within royal tradition, the materials entrusted to executors often go far beyond legal documents or lists of possessions. A monarch's private archive can contain handwritten letters, confidential reflections, carefully worded instructions, and deeply personal messages intended for specific members of the family. These writings are rarely meant for public eyes. Instead, they exist as a final conversation between a ruler and those who will carry the institution forward. When the Queen appointed Anne and Sophie, she effectively placed them at the center of that final conversation, making them guardians of thoughts that may never be fully revealed to the outside world. Inside the palace, the quiet weight of this responsibility became immediately clear. Every sealed envelope, every preserved note, every carefully composed directive would now pass through their hands. Some of these documents might be practical guidance about personal possessions or private estates, but others could hold emotional significance far greater than any material inheritance. The Queen had lived through decades of triumphs, crises, and profound family moments. It is widely believed that she documented many of those reflections privately, choosing her words with the same careful precision that defined her reign. One possibility whispered among royal observers is that the Queen left personal messages addressed to individual members of the family. Such letters could carry advice, reassurance, or even quiet warnings meant to guide them during difficult moments. For Anne and Sophie, delivering those messages would not simply be a task of administration. It would be an act of trust, ensuring that the Queen's voice continued to reach her family even after she was gone. The emotional weight of such responsibility cannot be overstated. Executors in this position must balance loyalty to the monarch with sensitivity toward the living members of the royal household. Beyond personal letters, speculation has also centered on the possibility that the Queen left reflections about the monarchy's future direction. Having spent a lifetime navigating the delicate relationship between tradition and modern expectation, she understood, too, the challenges that awaited the institution after her reign. If she chose to share guidance on those matters, it would likely be expressed in thoughtful, carefully phrased words, rather than rigid instructions. Such reflections could offer insight into how she believed the monarchy should adapt, how family unity should be protected, and how the crown could remain stable during uncertain times. Anne and Sophie's reputations for discretion suddenly took on even greater meaning in this context. Both women had spent years demonstrating an ability to handle sensitive matters without seeking attention or influence. That quality may have been precisely why the Queen entrusted them with this responsibility. She needed individuals who would safeguard her words with integrity, people who understood that some legacies are preserved not through public declarations, but through quiet respect for what must remain private. For them, the task is not only administrative, but deeply emotional, carrying out the wishes of a monarch who was also a mother, grandmother, and guiding figure within the family demands strength and empathy in equal measure. Every instruction they interpret, every message they deliver, carries echoes of the Queen's long life and the institution she dedicated herself to protecting. Their role is not simply to execute decisions, it is to honor a legacy built over decades of service. As whispers about these hidden documents spread beyond palace walls, a growing realization began to take shape. Whatever the Queen left behind was likely intended to influence the royal family quietly, rather than dramatically. Guidance delivered through private words can sometimes carry greater power than any public decree, and with Anne and Sophie acting as guardians of those words, the Queen's final intentions may continue shaping the monarchy in ways that remain unseen yet deeply significant. NT. But while the world speculated about hidden letters and instructions, another story was unfolding, one that revealed just how deeply the Queen had trusted Sophie. When Sophie first entered the royal family, few could have predicted the role she would one day play. She arrived without the long lineage or public spotlight that surrounded many senior royals, yet over the years, something remarkable happened. Through quiet dedication, humility, and unwavering support for the monarchy, Sophie earned something far more valuable than titles: the Queen's complete confidence. In the early days, Sophie's introduction to royal life was anything but simple. Entering one of the most scrutinized families in the world meant learning to navigate traditions that had been shaped over centuries. Every gesture carried meaning, every public appearance was examined, and every decision could become a subject of speculation. For someone who had lived outside that world, the adjustment required patience and resilience. Sophie understood quickly that survival in royal life depended not on attracting attention, but on mastering the quiet discipline that the institution demanded. Rather than rushing to claim a visible place within the royal spotlight, she chose a different path. She listened carefully, observed the rhythms of royal duty, and allowed herself time to adapt. This approach set her apart from many who had struggled with the pressures of the monarchy. The Queen, who had spent a lifetime observing the character of those around her, noticed the difference. Sophie was not trying to reshape the royal environment to suit herself. Instead, she was learning how to serve within it. Over time, that patience began to deepen into something far more meaningful. Sophie's interactions with the Queen grew warmer, more personal. What began as formal exchanges gradually evolved into moments of genuine, connection. The Queen valued people who brought calm rather than chaos into her world, and Sophie's steady presence seemed to offer exactly that. Conversations between them were said to carry an ease that was rare within royal circles, where the pressures of duty often overshadowed personal warmth. As years passed, Sophie's role quietly expanded. She was increasingly present during private visits and family gatherings, where the Queen preferred the company of those she trusted most. These were not moments that made headlines or appeared in official schedules, yet they held significance far greater than any public engagement. They reflected the gradual formation of a bond built on mutual respect and understanding. During the Queen's later years, that bond became even more visible to those working within the palace. Sophie often appeared at her side during moments when comfort and familiarity mattered most. The Queen admired Sophie's calm approach to responsibility, a quality that stood out in a world where royal figures were often surrounded by pressure and expectation. Sophie rarely sought recognition for her efforts. Instead, she focused on fulfilling her duties with quiet consistency, a trait the Queen valued deeply. Insiders began to recognize that Sophie had become more than simply a member of the extended royal family. She had become a trusted presence within the Queen's inner circle. When difficult family situations arose or sensitive matters required careful handling, Sophie's ability to remain composed proved invaluable. Her loyalty was never dramatic or performative. It was steady, reliable, and constant, qualities that carried immense weight in a monarchy built on tradition and trust. Looking back, it is no longer surprising that the Queen ultimately chose Sophie to share such an extraordinary responsibility. The decision was not simply about rewarding loyalty. It reflected the Queen's belief that Sophie possessed the judgment and discretion required to protect the monarchy's most delicate matters. Through years of quiet dedication, Sophie had transformed from an outsider, learning the complexities of royal life, into one of the institution's most dependable figures. That transformation tells a powerful story about how trust is earned within the royal family. It is not granted because of status or expectation. It is built slowly through actions that demonstrate loyalty, patience, and an understanding of the Crown's enduring responsibilities. Sophie had proven that she possessed those qualities in abundance. By the time the Queen made her final arrangements, the choice had likely become clear in her mind. Yet Sophie would not carry this responsibility alone, because standing beside her was someone whose devotion to the monarchy had been tested and proven across an entire lifetime of service. And standing beside Sophie in this extraordinary responsibility was the one royal whose dedication had never been questioned, Princess Anne. As the implications of the Queen's decision became clear, one truth emerged above all others. The responsibility now rested with two women who had quietly dedicated their lives to the crown: Princess Anne, the tireless embodiment of duty, and Duchess Sophie, the Queen's trusted confidant. Together, they had been entrusted with safeguarding the final wishes of a monarch whose reign shaped history. The deeper one looks at this decision, the more it begins to feel like the closing chapter of a story the Queen had been writing for years. Because Anne and Sophie represent two very different paths within the royal family, yet both lead to the same destination: unwavering loyalty to the crown. Princess Anne had spent her entire life under the expectations of monarchy, born into its traditions, molded by scrambled demands, and tested repeatedly by its pressures. She became known as one of the most hard-working members of the royal household. Her dedication was never about public admiration. It was about responsibility. Anne approached royal duty with the kind of discipline that rarely seeks applause, yet quietly commands respect across generations. Sophie's path, by contrast, was one of transformation. She entered the royal world as an outsider, learning its customs and complexities. But over time, she grew into a figure defined by quiet strength and steady commitment. The Queen watched that evolution carefully. Where others might have been overwhelmed by the expectations of royal life, Sophie adapted with patience and humility. She never attempted to overshadow tradition. Instead, she embraced it with sincerity. That difference did not go unnoticed by the monarch, who had spent decades studying the character of those around her. Together, Anne and Sophie form a partnership built not on ambition, but on balance. Anne represents experience, discipline, and the unwavering backbone of royal duty. Sophie represents empathy, calm judgment, and the ability to navigate delicate relationships within the family. One brings the authority of a lifetime devoted to service. The other brings the steady reassurance of someone who understands how to maintain harmony in moments of quiet tension. When combined, those strengths create something the Queen valued above all else: stability. And stability was precisely what the Queen had always sought to protect. The monarchy is not simply an institution of ceremonies and titles. It is a symbol that must endure through uncertainty, change, and sometimes conflict. By entrusting Anne and Sophie with the responsibility of carrying out her final directives, the Queen ensured that the guardians of her legacy would be individuals who understood the institute, from both emotional and strategic perspectives. They were not chosen for spectacle. They were chosen for reliability. There is also something deeply symbolic about the Queen's choice. For decades, the strength of the monarchy has often rested not only with kings, but with the quiet resolve of women who supported the crown through loyalty and resilience. In appointing Anne and Sophie together, the Queen seemed to acknowledge that tradition. She placed her trust in two figures who had proven, again and again, that their dedication was not temporary, it was permanent. Behind closed palace doors, the influence of that decision will likely continue to unfold. Executors operate away from the public spotlight, yet their role carries immense weight. They safeguard personal instructions, interpret final wishes, and ensure that the voice of a monarch continues to guide the institution even after her passing. Anne and Sophie now carry that responsibility together. And while their work may remain largely unseen, its impact could quietly shape the future of the royal family for years to come. In many ways, this appointment reflects the Queen's final message about the values she believed should define the monarchy: loyalty over ambition, stability over spectacle, duty above all else. Those were the principles she embodied throughout her reign, and by choosing Anne and Sophie to carry out her last directives, she ensured that those principles would remain protected by individuals who understood their importance. What began as a quiet confirmation has now revealed something far more profound. The Queen's final act of trust was not simply about assigning responsibility. It was about safeguarding a legacy built over decades of service to the crown. And in placing that responsibility in the hands of two women who had quietly earned her confidence, she ensured that the values she cherished would continue guiding the monarchy long after her reign had ended. And as the monarchy moves forward, one lingering realization remains: the Queen's final act of trust may continue shaping the royal family long into the future. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.